So, I rarely watch baseball. I'm not gonna lie, I seriously haven't even watched one full game this whole year. I don't even have a favorite team anymore. I quit watching it when I was a little kid. But I have been following some of the stories that are going on. I've been following them for a couple of years. I was watching the playoffs a couple of years ago and I realized that baseball was rigged by the numbers. Before I even knew gematria, I saw that Mike Moustakas hit his fourth postseason home run in the fourth inning. It made the score 4-4, and I looked at my cell phone and it was exactly 4 p.m. Central Time. And literally ever since that game, I have noticed just tons of stuff. It's super connected to every sport. And when I learned gematria, it made it even more clear how scripted these sports games truly are. So last year, I was following some stuff, and originally in like July, I had talked about a possible Subway series between the Yankees and the Mets. And one of the biggest things that I was building off of the Mets from was the movie Trainwreck, because the movie Trainwreck was all about the New York Knicks and the New York Mets. And Pope Francis was making his first trip to the United States, and there was a Philadelphia train wreck that was super connected to that. And then we got the movie Trainwreck, but that train wreck happened at 9:23 p.m. The movie Trainwreck starts off when Amy Schumer's character is 9 years old. The rest of the movie takes place 23 years later. Pope Francis visited the United States on his 923rd day as Pope. The next day, he went to the White House at 9:23 in the morning on 9:23. LeBron James was also in that movie, and LeBron James in Jewish gematria equals 923. Also, if you write out Trainwreck, it equals 122, just like if you write out Pope Francis. And in the beginning of October, somebody had showed me a video of a guy dressed up like the Pope, and he caught a home run ball of Salvador Perez. And the game was on 6/6 of 2015. If you add 1 and 5, it's even 6. A lot like 666. A guy dressed as the Pope catches the home run ball of Salvador Perez. And I had changed my mind. I said, there's got to be something significant about Pope Francis's visit. There was just so much foreshadowing in movies and everything else. And also, last year, in regards to Back to the Future, the Chicago Cubs were supposed to win the World Series because it was 2015, and Marty McFly goes to 2015, and the Cubs win in 5 and whatnot. But that movie comes to an end on October 27th, and remember, the train pushes the DeLorean back to 1985, and also a train destroys the time machine. And there was all kinds of train symbolism last year. You had Jared from Subway go to jail. You had the French train attack. Nicholas Winton, the guy who saved all the Jews on the train. There's just tons of train foreshadowing. And Back to the Future, if you write Back to the Future out, it has the small way equals 59, just like Pope Francis the small way. Also, if you write out Kansas City Royals, it equals 59. And the very same day that Back to the Future comes to an end in 1985, the Royals were the team who won the World Series. Also, Kansas City in gematria equals 122, just like Pope Francis. The Golden State Warriors won last year. Last year, they equal 122. And I also, at the same time, had noticed a whole lot of stuff connecting to the royal family. It was the Royals, and they played the Mets, who played in Queens. New York in gematria equals 111. Queen Elizabeth was born on the 111th day of the year. It was the 111th World Series last year. New York Mets has identical gematria to Queen Elizabeth II. Also, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who lost the NBA Finals last year, equal 168, just like the New York Mets. I had originally picked then in the beginning of October, I said Kansas City is going to win the World Series, and I had thought they were going to beat the Cubs because I talked about this movie I Pet Goat 2 that also has a whole bunch of subliminal stuff, and the reason that the Cubs haven't won the World Series or even been to a World Series was because of the curse of the Billy Goat. And then we have this movie that has all this subliminal foreshadowing stuff in it, and it's called I, Pet Goat. They made this movie because on 9/11, George Bush was reading a book called The Pet Goat to a bunch of kids at a school in Florida, and supposedly when he heard the news of 9/11, he just kept reading the story or whatever. So anyway, I just wanted to point out a little bit of a background of what I'm talking about. You know, they even have the baseball-looking lights here, or the sporting event lights onto the Goat. Anyway, we got this trade then from the Yankees to the Cubs of this guy, Aroldis Chapman. And in this article on ESPN, they even say, Prince Hal Steinbrenner shows he can be as ruthless as King George. And if you've been following a lot of my videos, I talk about how there is just a super royal family theme that has been ongoing since the World Series. And I've talked about how I believe it has something to do with Queen Elizabeth dying and her son Prince Charles becoming the new king, and he would be King Charles III. So in Gematria, this guy's name here, it equals 134. Also, his full name equals 134. If you write out King Charles III, it also equals 134. So interesting, you know, I've been talking about the prince and the royal theme, and this guy's name, 2 ways equals the same as King Charles III. What's interesting about this article, though, is that they say as ruthless as King George. And you're supposed to think of, you know, King George III, who was the king during the American Revolutionary War. But what's interesting is that if Prince Charles does become the king, he might also become King George VII because of the negative connotations in regards to the King Charles I and King Charles II during the English Civil War. They were both the kings during the English Civil War. And supposedly he denies that, though, or whatever. It was just a rumor. But just putting it out there. And who knows what's going on with my trackpad. It keeps zooming in and moving all over the place. Driving me crazy. But in regards to Back to the Future and the Curse of the Billy Goat that I'm going to talk about as we move on, Marty McFly also equals 134. And remember, in Back to the Future in 2015, when he's reading the newspaper, it even says, you know, Princess Diana is the queen. It says Queen Diana. It says we have a woman president. And obviously Princess Diana was Prince Charles's first wife, and then he got divorced or whatever, then she died in Paris. A ton of stuff to that as well. Also, it says Prince Hal Steinbrenner. Prince Hal Steinbrenner in Gematria equals 112, and this year it's the 112th World Series. Also, if you go from the Cubs' first game of the season on April 4th, the trade was on July 25th, which is a span of 112 days. The Yankees were also supposed to play their first game of the season on April 4th, but it got postponed to April 5th, 4-5, which I'll talk about why that's significant. But just in regards to the 112, pretty interesting they were playing the Houston Astros on their first game of the season. Houston equals 112. And if you remember, this year the singer Prince also died on the 112th day of the year. It was also Queen Elizabeth's 90th birthday. The Simpsons, an episode of The Simpsons, even killed him, George Clooney, and Neil Armstrong, and that episode came out on 11/2, November 2nd. The World Series this year, also, if it goes 7 games, it will come to an end on November 2nd. In that episode, though, like I said, they killed George Clooney. If you write out George Clooney's full name, it equals 112. They also killed Neil Armstrong, the first guy to walk on the moon, right? And it was in Apollo 11. Apollo 11 equals 134, just like King Charles III. Neil Armstrong in Gematria equals 66, just like the word Charles. So also, the day that he was traded, on July 25th, look at that. So the Yankees started their season off. They were supposed to play Houston. And then when they traded him, the day they traded him, they started their little series again with Houston. Also, something I never noticed until right now, the Yankees got their 51st win in this game, right? And Houston is hosting the Super Bowl this year, Super Bowl 51. So who knows, maybe that's connected. I'll remember that. Also, New York Yankees in Gematria, the big way 191, the small way 65. The word Prince equals 65. If you just write out Yankees, it equals 80, just like King Charles III, the small way. And in my old videos last year, I talked a lot about this 45 stuff. So Cubs equals 45, Wrigley equals 45, Illinois equals 45, and Back to the Future, they were supposed to play Miami. Miami equals 45. It even pops up and says Sports Flash that equals 45. The reason the Cubs haven't won a World Series is supposedly because of the curse of the Billy Goat that is from 1945, the 1945 World Series, the last time the Cubs made the World Series. And what happened in that game was this guy right here, Billy Cianis, brought his goat in, and something to do with his goat stunk really bad, and he got kicked out of the game. He got kicked out in the 4th inning, right, with 5 innings to go even. The 4th inning, a lot like 45. And check this out, the goat was even supposedly named Murphy. Murphy equals 38, just like Prince the small way. Anyway, Billy Cianis, the owner of the goat then, he actually died on 10/22/1970, so that was 45 years ago. This year it will be 46, and I'll show why that's significant in a little bit. Billy Cianis in Gematria equals 131. Prince Charles also equals 131. And I know that Back to the Future Day was in 2015, but it's still connected to 2016 because in Part 3, they go back to 1885, which is 131 years ago. They even used train number 131 to push the DeLorean back to October 27th, 1985. And that day also leaves 65 days left until the end of the year. Remember, Prince equals 65. It was also 31 years ago this year. If you write out the word 31, it equals 134, just like King Charles III. This day was also Philadelphia's 303rd anniversary of being founded. Philadelphia and Gematria also equals 65. And when you think about it, Philadelphia is where the Fresh Prince is from. So in this movie, I Pet Goat 2 then, George Bush actually morphs into Obama. Last year I talked about how Obama winks at 106, and that Philadelphia train wreck was going 106 miles an hour. It was the engine number 601. I also talked about Gregorian to Julian. October 6th, a lot like 10/6, is also the same day as 9/23 and it connected back to Pope Francis. It had also been 106 seasons since the Cubs had won the World Series. And the curse of the Billy Goat actually happened in Game 4 of the 1945 World Series that was played on October 6th. Once again, a lot like 106. So I'm not exactly sure. It seemed like they were going to for sure go to the World Series last year because of that. But the curse of the Billy Goat also has a lot of connections to this year as well. And there's also a lot more connections to Chicago in general that connect to this year. So let's move on a little bit. I want to get back to the 45 and the 54 stuff. At exactly 54 seconds on this I Pet Goat movie or video is when they finally show you this whole thing up on the chalkboard here. It says evil and then, blank T, blank, blank N. And it's supposed to say evolution, right? So it's missing the U, the I, and the O. If you add up U, I, and O, it equals 45. It also, evil is love backwards. And, there's even all these hearts. There's a heart here. I talked about how there is something super connected to Valentine's Day. But when you think about Chicago, they even are famous for the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre was also 87 years ago, which, interesting, if you write out Queen Elizabeth II, the small way equals 87. Clinton also equals 87. Clinton in Jewish gematria equals 262. And if just interesting, I guess, if you go from Valentine's Day to what could potentially be Game 7 of the World Series this year on 11-2 in the 112th World Series, a span of 262 days. I've mentioned this number a whole lot. The word queen in gematria equals 26 and also 62. Queen Elizabeth became the queen. She was born in 1926, became the queen on 2/6. Her coronation was on 6/2. Tons of other stuff. I just want to show Clinton in gematria equals 87, also 262. Also in gematria, St. Valentine's Day equals 214, and it's literally on February 14th, 214. St. Valentine's Day Massacre equals 80 in gematria, just like King Charles III. Also, in regards to Obama, then, Obama even, out of Illinois, Chicago, and he is 54 years old right now. If you write out the word love equals 54, but he's going to be 55 on August 4th, 8-4. If you write out 55, it equals 54, so it still makes sense. I talked about that during the College World Series. So also, on the board here, it says evil, which is love backwards. So interesting, evil, love backwards. Instead of 54, it would be 45. If you write out 45, it equals 45. If you write out 54, it equals 45. Valentine's Day is on the 45th day of the year. It's also the second day of Lupercalia, the Roman festival where they celebrate and sacrifice a goat and also a dog and a wolf, or a dog/wolf. So just interesting, they sacrifice a goat. We have this iPet goat, the curse of the Billy goat. The book that it was based off of, this movie or video, was called The Pet Goat, that equals 45 in gematria. The 45th prime number is even 197. Prince in Jewish gematria equals 197. Interesting too, we're also in an election year for the 45th president. So now this guy gets traded from the Yankees to the Cubs, and he's wearing number 54 even. That's really stood out to me. And the day that the Cubs got him, they lost to the White Sox 5-4. 45, though, also reminds me of the end of World War II. And that will be 71 years ago on September 9th this year, 9-2. If you write out 71, it even equals 45. And Chapman, he was traded 92 days before the World Series begins even. If you write out World War III, it equals 71. And a while back I made a video about August 12th being a possible significant date and whatnot. I'll show you in a second. I didn't realize how it actually is connected to baseball. Baseball in gematria equals 54 even. So, World War II came to an end 71 days before the 21st anniversary of World War I ending, and August 12th this year will be 21 days before the 71st anniversary of World War II ending. Hopefully that makes sense, but it's the mirror numbers, the 71 and the 21, and it's all connecting to the ending of the World Wars. But another interesting thing, so World War III equals 71 if you write out 3 that way. If you write out World War III with the 3 I's, it equals 141. And if you write out the word 21, it equals 141. August 12th is also the day that leaves 141 days in the year. Think about the atomic bomb. It was made with plutonium-239. Plutonium equals 141. The Chicago Cubs also in their 141st season this year. If you write out 141, it equals 128 and 56. Both numbers I've talked about a lot in regards to Pennsylvania. And also August 12th, when you think about it, it's either 8/12 or 12/8, a lot like 128. Pennsylvania became a state on a date numerology of 128, founded by William Penn, who equals 56 and 128. Today is even the last day of the Democratic National Convention that's held in Philadelphia. If you write out Democratic National Convention, it equals 128. August 12th in the United Kingdom is also known as the Glorious 12th. If you write out Glorious 12th, it equals 69, just like World War III the small way. I also talked about how, Israel was created out of World War, right? And this year, on November 29th, the 334th day of the year, Philadelphia will also be 334 years old this year, 33 days before that. But moral of the story, this year will be the 69th anniversary of Israel being recognized. So anyway, also as I was researching August 12th, I come to find out that the 1994-95 Major League Baseball strike that I talked about how I kind of quit watching baseball when I was a kid after that, it began on August 12th of 1994. I mean, pretty interesting. And this year it also canceled the World Series, so that means that this year it will be the 107th World Series since the Cubs last won. Even though it's the 108th year, it's only the 107th World Series. King Charles in Gematria equals 107. Chapman, who got traded to the Cubs, is 28 years old. The 28th prime is 107. He even got traded 18 days before August 12th. Baseball, the small way, equals 18. If you write out 18 in Gematria, it equals 46. If you write out Chicago, it equals 46. Chicago Cubs, the small way, equals 46. Billy Cianis, the guy from the Curse of the Billy Goat who cursed the Cubs, this year on October 22nd will even be the 46th anniversary of his death. And if you go from August 12th to the 46th anniversary of his death, a span of 71 days. Back to the Future Day in 2015 is on 10/21. That's the day that leaves 71 days left until the end of the year. Remember, the Cubs got knocked out of the playoffs last year on this day even. And when they got knocked out of the playoffs, they even had a 4-5 playoff record. It was also their 171st game that season, so just think about that. In regards to 17 and 71, the mirrors were coming up on 2017. I actually just talked about 17 and 71 in my previous video in regards to the Super Bowl and the death of Nebraska Cornhusker Sam Foltz and how it's connected to the 1971 national championship that Nebraska won, beating the LSU Tigers. But let's move on here. So the first ever Major League Baseball game was on 5/4/1871. I mean, give me a break. Baseball equals 54. The first game ever was on 5/4. It was also 5 months, 4 days before the Great Fire in Chicago began on October 8th, 1871. So 10-8, a lot like 108. The Cubs haven't won a World Series since 1908, which was 108 years ago. The Willis Tower that's in Chicago is 108 stories tall. Also 1871, it is 145 years ago. Chicago, Illinois equals 145. If you write out 145, it equals 108. And in I Pet Goat 2, Obama starts laughing at 108 in the movie. Who knows if that's significant? Just thought I'd point it out. Also interesting, in numerology, you take out the 0. So it would just be 1 and 8, a lot like 18. So once again, baseball equals 18. Obama and Lincoln, also the only presidents out of Illinois. Just before a building collapses in this I Pet Goat film, they show Psalm 23 on this wall here, and then it goes over, and then the building collapses. Psalm 23 even equals 71 in Gematria. Notice the video on ESPN here they gave of the trade, 1:45, a lot like 145 like Chicago, Illinois. The day that he got traded, also 25/7. 257 is the 55th prime. Cubs, Chicago Cubs with the S exception even equals 55. July 25th, 2016 was also the 207th day of the year. Charles in Jewish gematria equals 207. Remember, Prince in Jewish gematria equals 197. If you write out 197, it equals 207. So also, earlier in the video, I talked about something a little bit significant to the Astros in regards to the Yankees playing the Astros. I've also been mentioning a Native American theme that I keep seeing, and it just seems to be really connected to the area that I live in. I've talked about the Omaha Indians. I even mentioned how the Cleveland Indians went on the 14-game winning streak. We even got a story today on CNN about the death of Chief David Bald Eagle, the chief of the Lakotas. He was in the movie Dances with Wolves, which I'm not going to keep rambling on, but it connects to Kevin Costner, who plays Jim Garrison in the movie JFK, which is also, that guy was born in Denison, Iowa, a place that I've talked about in regards to Brandon Scherf, who plays for the Washington Redskins, and a ton of other stuff. So anyway, what I noticed about this is that his birthday was February 28th, Chapman's birthday, February 28th. If you go to the day that he was traded 148 days after his 28th birthday. But the Cleveland Indians are also cursed because of this, the curse of Rocky Colavito. And they traded this guy away, and they got this other guy, Harvey Kuhn, or however you say that. But what was interesting, look when this guy died. February 28th, 1988. So 28 years ago. So this guy died exactly on Chapman's birthday. He literally, when Chapman was born, this guy died. So, also interesting, it's the curse of Rocky Colavito. I just made a video about Philadelphia and Sylvester Stallone being in Nice, France. And I talked about the Rocky films and a ton of other stuff. But Cleveland Indians in gematria equals 148, and then Chapman was traded 148 days after his birthday, 148 days after this guy dies. Or, he died years ago, but he died age 57. He even played 57 games for the Cubs in his career. Then he dies age 57. World Series equals 57. George equals 57. And I just mentioned that in regards to the very beginning when they mentioned as ruthless as King George. Moon equals 57 in regards to Neil Armstrong and landing on the moon. It was in 1969. Remember, World War III equals 69. This guy also played 54 games for the Cubs in 1965. Prince equals 65. His name equals 54. Also 144. Baseball equals 54. If you write out 144 in gematria, it equals 108. Remember, it's been 108 years since the Cubs won the World Series. Major League, like the film, in regards to the Cleveland Indians, Major League equals 45 and 108. Hal Steinbrenner, ruthless as King George. Hal is also 46 years old this year. Chicago equals 46. Chicago Cubs equals 46. Also interesting, Steinbrenner has identical gematria to King George. So once again, no doubt they put that in the headline for a reason. Also, in the beginning, I said King Charles, or Prince Charles, could become King George VII. Just interesting, if you write out King George VII, it equals 84 and 138. Donald Trump equals 138. Trump equals 88. Elizabeth equals 88. Curse of the Billy Goat equals 88. On the chalkboard where it says Evil TN, if you write that out in gematria, it equals 88 and I Pet Goat. Remember Bob Gale, the Back to the Future guy, said that Biff Tannen was even based off of Donald Trump. The time travel speed is 88 miles an hour. Plutonium is the gas, but plutonium also makes the atomic bomb. August 12th to the election day, span of 88 days, election day even on 11/8. 11 times 8 is 88. August 8th, which is 8/8, is the day that leaves 145 days in the year. Chicago, Illinois equals 145. The Great Chicago Fire, 145 years ago. Back to the Future 3 came out on the 145th day of the year. Doc Brown even discovers time travel on a date numerology of 71. Flux capacitor, that makes time travel possible, also equals 59 in gematria, just like Back to the Future, just like McFly, just like Pope Francis, just like Kansas City Royals. Just interesting, if you write out 59, it equals 108 and 54. I know that doesn't necessarily make sense with the Cubs. One other thing I want to point out, if for some weird reason it is connected to like the next year, since last year was connected to 85, every sport was connected to 85. The Super Bowl, the college football championship, the college basketball championship, the World Series and whatnot. If for some reason it's moved on to 1986, it is interesting to point out that the Mets they won the World Series in 86, and their record, can't even talk, their regular season record was 108 and 54. There's also been a whole lot of back-to-back connections. I talked about that a ton in the NBA Finals. They were foreshadowing back-to-back like crazy. Cleveland Cavaliers equals 69, back-to-back equals 69. So, interesting. It wasn't actually the Warriors who won, but when you think about it, 2 years ago, the Royals lost the World Series to the Giants. Then they came back and they won the second year in back-to-back World Series, which, possibly there's something connecting to that. I feel like this other stuff is a lot more connected and coded, but, just wanted to put it out there just in case. I'm not really trying to make a prediction. I'm just trying to show that it is actually severely coded. And, I know Zachary K. Hubbard, clear back in spring training, had even picked the Astros and the Cubs in the World Series, which is, as I keep following stuff, the more I see that that's very, very possible. I'm just going to keep following the story like I did in the NBA and whatnot, and we'll see where it takes me. If I had to make a pick right now, I would probably agree with Zach and say the Astros and the Cubs in the World Series. But, it could possibly be the Indians. Who knows, though? The Astros are super connected through the number 112 and whatnot. And also with the Yankees trading this guy, playing the Astros on the first game of the season, and then also trading them when they played the Astros again, or trading him, seems very interesting. So, who knows? Like I said, going to keep following this. But, it's undeniable. There's a huge royal theme. It's connected to Pope Francis. These sports leagues are connected to real events as well, which is a scary thought in regards to how much the Major League Baseball right now and all of this is connected to World War and whatnot. So, like I said, have a good night. Peace.